under the golden towers of Dubai's early dawn, a soft and sorrowful hush drifted through the palace corridors. The desert wind carried a melody that felt wounded, as if the dunes themselves mourned a love gone quiet. Sheikh Hamdan stood by the vast window of light, his eyes tracing the horizon that once brought him peace, but today felt unbearably distant. Love had once bloomed around him like a desert rose, rare, radiant, resilient, yet now its petals lay scattered across the halls of memory. The palace felt heavier than ever, echoing with the kind of silence that hurts the soul. All the footsteps that used to dance with joy seemed erased, like they never belonged to this place. His wife, the gentle moon of his long Arabian nights, had left without cruelty, without shouting, only the soft ache of a heart too burdened to stay. Questions rose inside him like desert storms, unanswered, relentless, sharp. Why does love, even the strongest love, sometimes forget the way home? He whispered her name into the sunrise, hoping the morning breeze would somehow carry it to her lonely heart. But even the wind seemed afraid to return it, as though it knew the wound was still open. He remembered the evenings they once shared, lanterns glowing softly on winding palace paths, their dreams floating like golden sparks around them, dreams so large, so full of promise, yet even the brightest lights can cast the deepest shadows. A quiet distance had grown between them, not from lack of love, but from the silent weight of expectations that follow the life of a royal heart. She had loved him, deeply, purely, beyond anything words could shape. But love can break when the world watches every breath you take. They were a story to the world, a symbol of beauty and destiny, yet behind the curtains, they were just two fragile souls trying to stay close, in a palace too big for their wounds. The day she left felt unreal, as if time itself hesitated to move forward. The palace staff walked gently, their eyes lowered, as though the walls might shatter if anyone spoke too loudly. He found her note resting on the marble table, ink slightly smudged from trembling hands. It wasn't a letter of blame or a confession of anger, just a quiet message from a woman whose heart had grown too tired. She wrote of the loneliness that lived between the golden rooms. She wrote of nights where she waited for him beside the window, watching the moon fade behind the towering skyline. She wrote of how love should have felt warm and soft, but instead felt like an ocean she was drowning in alone, not because he didn't care, but because life demanded too much from him. From them. He read each word slowly, as though reading too fast might break the fragile truth hidden there. His hands shook, not from anger, but from the realization that love can slip away, even when you believe it is strong. He remembered her laughter, light, musical, the kind that brightened the world. And he remembered the silence that slowly replaced it, creeping in like winter. After a long summer, she had never wanted the throne, never asked for a crown. She only asked for him. His time, his attention, his heart without distractions. But the world had other plans, pulling him in every direction, except the one where she waited. He tried to ignore the growing distance, telling himself that love could survive anything. But love, she wrote, cannot survive alone. Her final line struck him, like an arrow dipped in sadness. I love you deeply, but I cannot stay where my heart feels forgotten. And the moment he read it, a tear broke free, the kind that comes not from pain alone, but from understanding. He walked through the palace gardens. As the sun climbed higher, its warmth unable to melt, the coldness settling in his chest. Every flower reminded him of her, the way she used to pause, to touch a blooming rose, as if greeting an old friend. He remembered how she loved the quiet corners, the hidden paths shaded by palm trees, where she would sit with a book, waiting for him to finish his endless duties. Sometimes he came, sometimes he didn't. Those were the moments, he realized now, that began carving a distance they never learned to speak about. He sat on the bench where she once waited, tracing the carvings on the wood, made by lovers long before him. He wondered if they, too, had felt this ache, this strange mix of love and loss, woven into the same breath. The falcons flew above him, circling the skies with freedom. He suddenly envied. Even the desert wind seemed freer than his heart. He wished he could turn time backward, back to the nights when her hand felt safe in his, back to the gentle moments when love had no cracks. He closed his eyes and heard her voice, soft as prayer, warm as dawn, fragile as a falling star. She had once told him that love was not something you declare once, but something you prove in the quiet hours of everyday life. He wondered when he stopped proving it. She had supported him through storms of responsibility, through the weight of leadership, through the demanding eyes of the world. But who supported her? Who held her heart when it trembled in the darkness? He never meant to hurt her. He never meant to forget the small things she needed: a conversation, a shared sunset, a moment of pure togetherness, away from the cameras, away from duty. He realized that love does not vanish in a single moment. It fades slowly, quietly, like a candle burning down to its final whisper of flame. And now, all he had left was the echo of her absence, a silence so deep it made the palace feel like an empty echo of its former self. As evening draped itself over Dubai, the palace lights flickered on, like stars scattered across marble floors. But even the glow of 1,000 chandeliers could not brighten the darkness pressed against his heart. He wandered through the long hallways, each step heavy with memory. He paused by the balcony, where she used to stand beside him, leaning softly against his shoulder as they watched the world glitter below. She loved the city, its heartbeat, its brilliance, its endless horizon of dreams. But she did not love what it demanded from him: the hours stolen, the nights spent away, the constant weight of being needed by everyone except her. He remembered how she would wait, with a quiet smile, even when disappointment sat behind her eyes. She never voiced her hurt loudly. She carried it gently, hoping he would notice without her having to break. But he didn't notice soon enough. He thought love was strong enough to hold itself together. He didn't realize that even royalty is human, and even queens of the heart can feel unseen. He opened the door to their room, the scent of her perfume still lingering in the air, like a ghost refusing to fade. He walked to the vanity, where her jewelry once sparkled, tiny reflections of moments they once shared. Now it sat empty. The absence felt louder than silence. He touched the edge of the mirror, seeing his reflection distorted by grief. How strange, he thought, that a man surrounded by the world could lose the one soul he truly needed. He remembered the last evening they spent together, her quiet voice, her distant gaze, her hand slightly trembling when he held it. She had said, sometimes love isn't about staying. Sometimes it's about letting go before we destroy each other. He hadn't understood then. Now every word felt like a prophecy fulfilled. He sank onto the bed, where her pillows still rested, soft, untouched, holding the warmth of memories. He was desperate not to forget. His chest tightened with the kind of sorrow that arrives slowly but stays forever. He whispered into the empty room, not expecting an answer, just needing to release the ache. If you ever come back, I will choose you first. Night settled over the palace, like a velvet curtain of sorrow, and the moon cast a pale glow through the tall arched windows, illuminating the emptiness that had taken her place. He rose from the bed slowly, as if moving too quickly might make the memories slip away. He walked toward the balcony, the cool night air brushing against him, soft as a whisper he longed to hear again. He closed his eyes and imagined her standing beside him, her hair dancing in the desert breeze, her laughter echoing, like a melody written only for him. It felt so real. He almost reached out to hold her hand. Almost. But all he found was the cold railing and the loneliness wrapped around his fingers. Below him, the city of Dubai sparkled endlessly, alive with dreams and ambitions, yet his heart felt painfully still. He wondered how the world could remain so bright when his own world felt dimmed beyond repair. He thought of the first time he saw her, a moment as vivid as yesterday. She had not been dazzled by his title, nor overwhelmed by the weight of his name. She saw him, the man behind the crown, and loved him for who he truly was. But somewhere along the way, the crown grew heavier, and the man became harder to reach. He began drowning in responsibilities, leaving her alone on the shore, calling out to him, with a voice that grew quieter each day. He regretted every missed dinner, every postponed promise, every moment he told himself there would always be more time. Time, he realized now, is the most fragile thing of all. He leaned forward, letting the moonlight wash over him, and he whispered her name again. Not out of desperation, but out of longing, out of love that refused to die. Somewhere in the distance, a falcon cried into the night, its call echoing through the sky, like a prayer searching for an answer. He listened, wondering if she heard it too, in whatever place she had gone, to heal her wounded heart. He wished he could tell her that she was never forgotten, that she was never unimportant, that his silence was not the absence of love, but the presence of too many burdens. But apologies whispered to the wind can never reach the person who needed them the most. The night deepened, and the palace, once alive with voices and footsteps, felt like a vast desert of silence. Even the guards walked more slowly, as if mourning the sadness that clung to the royal halls. He returned inside, his steps echoing in the long corridor, each sound reminding him that he was walking alone now. Loneliness was unfamiliar to him, not because he had never felt it, but because he had never allowed himself to acknowledge its weight. He passed by the room where she used to paint. He hesitated, hand resting on the carved wooden door. He had avoided this room since the day she left, but something inside him pushed him forward, urging him to face the memories. Instead of running from them, he opened the door slowly. The air inside still carried the faint scent of her jasmine perfume. Sunlight had once poured through the windows, filling the room with warmth and color. Now it felt hollow, like a heart that had forgotten how to beat. Canvases leaned against the walls, unfinished paintings of sunsets, waves, and delicate flowers. Her world expressed in color, when she could not express it in words. He walked toward one easel, where a canvas stood waiting, brush marks frozen in time. It was a portrait of him, but not the public version, not the prince the world adored. It was the man she saw when they were alone. Gentle-eyed, thoughtful, tired, human. She had captured his vulnerability in strokes of quiet brilliance, and suddenly he understood. She had always seen him, but had he ever fully seen her? He touched the edge of the canvas, his fingers trembling. A tear fell, landing softly on the painting, a drop of grief, blurring the colors she once poured her heart into. He looked at the empty chair, where she used to sit for hours, lost in her art, waiting for him to join her, even for just a moment. How many evenings had she spent alone here, painting away her loneliness? While he chased the world's expectations, he sat on the floor, beside her unfinished works, knees pulled close, as if trying to make himself small against the weight of regret. He whispered into the quiet room, "Why didn't you tell me how much you were hurting?" But he knew the answer. She had told him, not with words, but with silence, with the soft dimming of her smile, with the way her eyes stopped lighting up when he walked into the room. She had spoken a language he failed to listen to. He closed his eyes and let the memories wash over him like a tide. Her laughter, her quiet tears, her whispered wishes, her slipping away, long before she physically left. He remained in the painting room long after the moon had climbed high above the palace, as if sitting among her unfinished dreams might somehow bring her closer. But the only thing that came was the slow ache of truth. He finally rose, wiping the tears he didn't want to admit were there. He stepped back into the hallway, and the palace felt even larger, its vastness stretching like a reminder of everything he had failed to hold on to. He walked toward the courtyard fountain, where water fell in gentle streams that once brought her peace. She loved the sound of flowing water. She used to say it reminded her that life keeps moving, even when the heart stands still. He sat on the fountain's edge, listening to the rhythmic fall of droplets, echoing softly through the night. It was here, in this quiet space, that she once told him her dreams. Simple, tender things. To build a small art studio by the sea, to travel without schedules, to sleep under the stars, with no responsibilities waiting at dawn. He remembered how he laughed gently, not because her dreams were silly, but because he could not imagine a life where he wasn't needed by his country. He promised her that someday they would make time. For her dreams, too. He believed it. She believed it. But time is not a promise, unless you honor it. He felt a tightness in his chest as he realized how many of her dreams he had asked her to postpone. How many moments? He convinced her to wait for later. A later that never arrived. The fountain's water shimmered in the moonlight, and in its reflection, he saw a man with weary eyes. A man who carried the world on his shoulders, but failed to carry the heart that loved him most. He wondered where she was now. Was she thinking of him? Was she healing? Was she relieved? He didn't want her to suffer, yet he missed her with a depth that frightened him. A soft breeze swept across the courtyard, gently swaying the jasmine vines she planted with her own hands. He leaned forward, inhaling their delicate scent, feeling as though the flowers themselves were trying to comfort him. He remembered the day she planted them, how she knelt in the soil, her hands dirty, her face bright with joy. He had teased her about being a princess, with flowers in her hair, and she had laughed, calling him the prince, who didn't know the value of quiet moments. Now he understood. Those quiet moments were where love lived, and he had missed too many of them. The night grew colder, and he wrapped his arms around himself, as if holding together a heart that was breaking slowly. He whispered into the empty courtyard, "I should have stayed with you when you needed me most." The courtyard felt like a sanctuary of memories, each corner holding fragments of a love he once believed was unbreakable. But even stone can crack, even fountains can run dry, and even hearts carved from strength can learn the weight of sorrow. He rose from the fountain slowly, as though standing meant leaving another piece of her behind. His footsteps carried him toward the royal stables, a place she cherished more than all the glittering halls of gold. She loved the horses, their honesty, their freedom, their ability to sense a human heart without needing a single word. When she walked among them, they lowered their heads, trusting her gentle spirit, as if they understood her sadness long before he ever did. He entered the stable quietly, and the horses stirred softly, recognizing his presence, but searching for hers. He felt a painful twist inside. Even the animals felt her absence. He stopped at the stall of her favorite mare, Saffron, a graceful creature with a coat that gleamed like evening gold. Saffron whinnied softly, nudging his chest, as though asking where the woman with the warm hands had gone. He stroked the mare's head slowly, feeling the warmth beneath her skin, and whispered, "She's not here anymore." Saffron lowered her head, as if in mourning. He remembered the mornings. She would arrive before sunrise, feeding the horses, brushing their manes, talking to them, as though they were her confidants. Perhaps they were. Perhaps she poured her loneliness into their silent understanding, when he was too busy to hear her quiet cries for connection. There was one memory he could never shake. The day she asked him to ride with her through the desert. She said the dunes were calling, that the wind felt softer when shared. He had promised to join her, but a meeting ran late, and by the time he arrived, the moon had already risen, and she was gone. He never asked how long she waited. Now he wished he had. He leaned against Saffron's stall, letting the familiar scent of hay and sand wrap around him. He wondered if she still rode somewhere far away, letting the wind heal the wounds he never meant to cause. The stable lights flickered softly, casting gentle shadows that moved like ghosts of memories. Her laughter, her footsteps, her fingertips brushing the horses' necks. With affection he admired, but never fully understood. He inhaled deeply, the air thick with longing, and whispered into the quiet, "If I could go back, I would ride beside you. Every morning, every night, every moment you reached for me, and found only air, and in the silent response of the sleeping horses." He felt the truth settle inside him. Love is not lost in one moment. It slips away when you stop showing up for the moments that matter. He stepped out of the stables with a heaviness in his breath, the night air colder than he remembered it ever being. Even the stars above him seemed dimmed by the weight pressing on his heart. He walked toward the old palm garden, a hidden place within the palace grounds. where she often sought refuge, when her thoughts grew too loud. He knew he would find no trace of her there now, yet his feet carried him, as if memory itself guided his steps. The palms swayed gently, rustling like soft whispers in the night. Their shadows danced on the pathway, reminding him of the evenings, when she would wander barefoot over the cool stone, saying she loved the earth without barriers between her and its touch. He reached the stone bench, where she used to sit, with a sketchbook on her lap, drawing the world the way she wished it could be, quiet, peaceful, free of pressure and expectations. He sat on the bench slowly, running his fingers over the carved patterns she once traced while thinking. Every detail felt sacred, like a piece of her soul had been etched into the stone. He remembered how she used to confide in him here, voice trembling but brave. She told him she feared becoming lost in the shadows of his life, that her identity would fade behind titles and tradition. He held her then, told her she was his equal, his light, his heart. And he meant it, every word. But love is not proven by meaning. It is proven by showing. He hadn't shown up enough. He hadn't listened closely enough. He hadn't held her tight when she was slipping through the cracks. He leaned his head back, gazing at the sky she loved so much. She once told him that stars were the tears of the universe, beautiful, distant, and silently grieving. Tonight, he felt like one of them. His thoughts traveled to the last conversation they had before she left. She had stood near this very bench, her eyes glassy with unspoken pain. She told him she felt unseen, that the palace walls were closing in around her, that she no longer recognized the reflection she saw in the mirror. He had reached out to her that night, but she stepped back, not out of rejection, but out of exhaustion. Her heart had grown weary from carrying the silence between them. He felt a sting of regret, sharp and unforgiving. He wished he had held her closer, asked better questions, looked deeper into her eyes, to find the pain hiding there. He whispered into the stillness, "I didn't realize your silence was a cry for help." The palms rustled, their leaves swaying as if acknowledging the truth he had taken too long to see. He placed his hand on the bench where she once sat, pretending the warmth of memory was her hand resting beneath his, and in that fragile illusion, he felt the weight of every moment he had lost. The palace grew quieter still, night stretching over it like a velvet shroud. Even the distant city lights seemed softened, as if the world knew that a love had slipped quietly into memory. He wandered into the music room, a place she adored, for its warm echoes and gentle melodies. She would play the oud, her fingers dancing across strings, with a grace that made the walls hum, with life she alone could bring. Now the instrument lay untouched, strings slightly dusty, silent as the heart that once gave it purpose. He reached out and touched it softly, closing his eyes to hear the echo that only her touch could awaken. Memories flooded him. Her playing in the evenings, her head bent slightly in concentration, a smile tugging at her lips. When he entered the room quietly, watching her with unspoken admiration, she had spoken once about how music soothed her soul, in ways words never could. It was in these moments that she had felt most herself, most free, most loved, and he had failed to protect that freedom, too often asking her to conform to the pressures of his world, to the endless expectations that weighed on both their hearts. He realized now that she had left not out of anger, but out of a desperate need to reclaim herself. Her love for him had not vanished. It had evolved into a quiet sorrow that required distance to survive. He sank to the floor of the music room, letting the shadows wrap around him like old friends. He whispered her name once again, not demanding an answer, not hoping for her return, but simply acknowledging the loss that would forever mark his heart. The oud sat beside him, silent yet alive with memory, its strings holding the echo of her soul. He realized that love sometimes asks for courage not to hold on, but to let go for the sake of the one you cherish. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of jasmine, a reminder of her laughter, her grace, and the quiet strength that had once filled every corner of his world. He closed his eyes, accepting the truth that she had left to save herself, and that sometimes love requires you to let someone go, even when every part of you wants to hold on forever.